Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the US presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to
general crime, which had been rather low until the government was taken over by Zoran Zaev and his Socialist Party, along with Ali Ahmeti and his Criminal Enterprise Party, DUI, seems to be rampant nowadays in Macedonia. Just today, a policeman was shot and wounded in Veles by criminals attacking people at a local graveyard, attempting to rob them. The number of general assaults, robberies, murder, and even people just disappearing continues to rise under this government. This would have been unheard of just a few years ago. In the meantime, the various racket scandals continue creeping through the courts, with Boki 13's infamous wardrobe of exotic clothing being seized from his home as evidence. This included 70 bags of designer names, including Louis Vuitton, Versace, Dolce & Gabbana, and Dior. And we are still waiting for Boki 13 to sing. And we are counting down to the April 12 elections, unless Zaev and his puppet Prime Minister Oliver Spasovsky think they need to change them. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin calling in from Skopje, Republic of Macedonia, at the foot of the Vodno Mountains. Actually in the middle between Vodno and Skopska Crna Gora somehow.
Absolutely. How you doing, Cvetin?
A bit sick, some virus going around. It's been stupidly warm here, and this always gets me sick when it's warm when it's supposed to be cold.
Well, yeah, I just got over a cold, and today we are recording this on Super Bowl Sunday for the listener coming to us from America, listeners coming to us from America. February 2, this will drop on February 3, which is the Iowa caucuses, having just completed the Brexit on the 31st. There's a lot going on in the world. And then of course we have, and then back over on this side we have the State of the Union with President Trump, and then his acquittal by the Senate on Wednesday. So my goodness,
what, he's not getting impeached?
No, he was already impeached. He's going to be acquitted by the Senate. So see, the House impeaches, the Senate either acquits or convicts, and that's the way it works. So he's been impeached,
But the impeachment, it does nothing, apparently.
Right. Well, just like Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was impeached, but he wasn't removed.
Well, so you're just... At least you're having fun.
Yeah, always. Lots of fun. So, well, let's see. Okay, going back to where we started. Let's see. This is a Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast.
Yeah.
We'll get into the other stuff a little bit later here. But let's just start kind of... this was disturbing when I read this story today about the policeman shot in Veles. And it just reminded me that general crime and lawlessness and robberies, assaults, all these things, we read about them every week in Macedonia. And, when I came there in 1996, lived there for 7 years, this was just unheard of. And even after that. And what's the deal? What's wrong with you people?
Yeah, things have been going downhill in this regard. We're investigating what is apparently a kidnapping in Strumicov. It looks like a kidnapping. God knows what happened.
Woman, the pregnant woman?
Yeah, it's a pregnant woman missing. A mother of a 3-year-old from Strumica has been missing. There's been a series of what was feared to have been kidnappings, some of them in the Roma community, some of them in downtown Skopje about sometime last year. One was resolved as a suicide, but it's a fragile situation. We had this weird murder of this kid who has been missing for for months. What was it? Early last year. So there is a, for a low crime country, what Macedonia used to be, it's definitely been going downhill. Zaev did make this huge amnesty of, I think about 1,000 prisoners who have, including many sentenced on violent crimes soon after he formed the government. People were joking that this is his voter base. He wanted to have, like they do in the States with, giving voting rights to prisoners. But this amnesty did coincide with the increase in crime. This thing in Vilnius, it was apparently a group of Roma. This is at least what Vilnius people say. Roma thugs who have been, attacking people, going to the graveyards, to the cemetery to pay respect to their dead, and the police was sent there specifically to arrest them. And one of them fought with the policeman and managed to wrestle his sidearm from the policeman and shot him 5 times, not once, 5 times in the stomach and in the knee. And the policeman he'll probably make it through. The doctors say he's not in critical condition, but still, it's unheard of. It's something that would be unheard of like just a few years ago.
Yeah, again, and when I lived there, came there in the mid '90s, and that was something that a lot of the expats who came there really enjoyed, was the fact that it was a very low crime area. You could literally leave your door unlocked and your kids out in the playground by themselves and things like that. Now it just seems that there's this deluge of general crime, which is worrying in and of itself. But how much this has to do with the economy. The economy isn't that great. How much this has to do with Zaev's releasing of criminals, and just the general spirit of how should I put this? He ignores the rule of law, and so that then therefore transfers, I think, to people, and they think, well, they can ignore the rule of law as well. So, which leads us conveniently to the second subject I alluded to in the monologue, and that is the corruption. So we've dealt with criminals, now we go to the corruption. So the racket scandals continue kind of meandering through the courts with lots of accusations, correct me if I'm wrong, lots of accusations of judges accusing other judges, even while the international community, the Western elites, I should say, absolutely insist that this new law on the public prosecutor be passed. When they got it wrong the first time, I don't know why they think they can get it right a second time. So, and then Boki 13, his 70 bags of clothes and shoes and purses or whatever it is he uses, taken from his home as evidence this week. What's the latest on that particular case?
Yeah, it was a great week for our judiciary. The part with the clothes, Boki and Katica, they're charged with a relatively small amount, like 1.5 million extorted from Urca Kamchev, and that. Well, yeah, it's peanuts for because Boki alone is charged in this. Yanev is charged with much less money. Financially looking, she's. Even if she's sentenced for this, the charges have been so drawn down that she'll get off easily. But it's been estimated, at least Vimmer is estimating, that they stole about 20 million from various businessmen. If we count the other companies which they targeted, like Sidan Micevski's company in Bitola, like Pelisterka also from Bitola, smaller companies in Gevgelia, in Kočani they targeted, Struga company. So Vimera puts the number at around 20 million through this line of racketeering alone. This is why when the prosecutors came out with all these bags of Gucci and Louis Vuitton, it sounded suspicious to everybody following the case because the prosecution so far has been working mostly to cover up the case, not to reveal it. So now if they establish that, look at all these fancy clothes, look at Boki, this drag queen dressing up in an aluminium sheet and calling it haute couture, it has a Gucci brand on on a stupid, like a microwave, like what do you call them? Those things,
Those safety blankets?
Things used. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they can establish that he spent all the money on being an idiot. But in reality, the numbers, the actual sum is much bigger, and it's assumed, very correctly that most of it ended up in the SDSM party for political, funding of political campaigns, or just being divided among Zaev and the other bigwigs. So, the moment when I saw this, the way it was portrayed, this, video presentation of Boki's high heels and Louis Vuitton bags, this is when they want to, focus the public toward a different, and they're counting on the public being gullible rubes and going for the shiny object, literally in this case, and not for the essence of the case.
Right. What's the schedule on this? Is there an end to this? I mean, it just seems to be. We've been talking about this since last summer.
Well, Boki is supposed to say his piece at some point, and his lawyer has been making predictions, announcements before the press that it's coming. So, they might start calling witnesses as well. These are now witnesses for the prosecution. One theory was that the idea was to run this through the court and then have Janeva sentenced and then acquitted by the appeals court while Zaev is still, or SDSM is still in power, so that this would be part of her deal. But the way things are going, it's unlikely to happen. We have very little time left until the elections. And, Boki still hasn't made his case. And meanwhile, other issues have been creeping up. So this was actually the meaningful portion of the trial. Sorry, the cold is catching up with me. We had Boki starts openly talking about the prosecutor who is charging him, Vilma Ruskovska, saying that he has strong evidence against her, that she was involved in corruption of 4 million euros. He doesn't specify, exactly what was the source, how she stole the money, but he is now, putting some flesh onto the bones of his expected, pushback against Zaev and Ruskovska. And then they had this Lila Stefanova prosecutor. She was deputy to Katica Janeva, but she was considered like a very important deputy. Like Janeva was obviously not the smartest in the bunch, and Lila was considered, neither were Alencha Ristovska, the blonde, or Fatima Fetai, the brunette, in the trio of the visible,
Charlie's Angels.
Matroshka dolls for the US Embassy. Lila was considered one of the smart ones, and she immediately starts testifying against Janeva. She goes directly against Janeva. Janeva got so unnerved, she started shouting at Lila in this ugliest imaginable, like peasant style, very, very low culture style. Like she called her Orospio in Macedonian. She used all these horrible terms against her, and she it's clear that she definitely was hit hard by this testimony. But more importantly, Lila said that she gave evidence that she testified that Judge Dobrila Kacarska, who is also another very important cog in Zaev's machine in the judiciary, who is known as very close to Orce Kamchav, family ties stretching back a long time, that she was calling into the special prosecutor's office, that she was staying in court all night long when Kamchav was being, when a verdict was expected and whether Kamchav will be detained. So Kacarski immediately shot back at Stefanova. So basically all the judges and prosecutors who supported Zaev, who were instrumental in the trials against the VMRO officials Zaev began, they're all now facing serious legal trouble. Katica Janeva is in house arrest. Dobrila Kacarska, she tried the April 27th trial where against former Interior Minister Mitko Chavkov and Jana Chinto and the other guys who were participating in the protest in the parliament. So she's now being accused of trying to get Kamchev out of prison with help of, because of family ties, but also for corruption reasons. Vilma Ruskovska, who put Janeva and Boki 13 in the dock, she's now being charged by Boki of taking a bribe of 4 million euros. The judge who tried Orca Kamchev, Vesna Demishkova, she's also suspected of asking 1.5 million from Orca through her brother to let him out of prison. So everybody who is anything in this SDSM, judicial elite, they're involved in. They're fighting each other. We basically have these two groups of prosecutors who are attacking each other, and it's it's really a sight to behold.
This is just breathtaking, and of course the Western media ignores it mostly. I think our friends over at Balkan Insight, which if it actually relied on just subscriptions and not foreign money, it can never survive. They've mentioned it a few times, but this is a real scandal, which you certainly don't see the various Western ambassadors in Macedonia talking about this at all. They're talking about, actually, in Kate Byrnes' case, she's actually threatening Macedonia now, and this is something I'm going to write about this week, I think. And let's move into that, because today again is April. Today is February 2. This drop on February 3. Elections are April 12. Parliament's supposed to dissolve February 12, so just in 9 days. And Kate Byrnes, the American ambassador, is already, she's been pretty quiet publicly. I guess behind the scenes she's been active, but now she's starting to bare her teeth and talk about, she's threatening, frankly. She's threatening Macedonians. Here's I listened to an interview that she gave with Sitel the other day, and here's the relevant quote, because the interviewer, and it's funny, because Kate, in this whole interview, Kate keeps using the N-word. I really want to say the N-word. And the interviewer with Sitel just keeps saying Macedonia, Macedonia, Macedonia. And you could tell, actually, I think, that Kate was somewhat uncomfortable. I mean, I think she's human, so she's got to be uncomfortable. But, of course, her career depends on that. The interviewer said that, if the center-right comes into power, they've talked about rescinding the so-called Prespa agreement. And she asked Ambassador Byrnes how she felt, and Kate said, quote, "This is a real concern, and citizens should not be confused or misled about what's at stake in this process. It's important to remember that good neighborly relations are a prerequisite for integration into Euro-Atlantic institutions, for the membership in NATO and the EU. But what Prespa did was ultimately unlock the path for the country to become a NATO ally and to pursue its path with the EU. What it did was help the country move forward from a place of stagnation where it had not been able to develop politically, economically, blah, blah, blah." And then in another interview she says, quote, "What concerns me about attempts to confuse people about the impact of Prespa, of what it means and what it has meant for the country, is that it risks losing the transformative effect that Prespa had. It risks confusing people about the benefits that they can have in terms of creating new opportunities, expanding regional cooperation, bringing in foreign investment, creating this positive future. So when I hear things talk about walking back Prespa, changing, reversing Prespa, I think the citizens really need to think about and to know the benefits that have come from this," end quote. So, yeah, a couple of things. So she uses she doesn't want people to be confused, and she used that in both. So this is, just kind of breaking this down and looking at the talking points that Kale has issued to her, or maybe perhaps that the State Department, maybe it's Phil Reeker and who's the fiction author, David Palmer.
Palmer, yeah. Mitch Palmer.
Actually, Matt Palmer, right, yeah. the fiction writer, and also happens to be a State Department employee. Maybe these are the talking points that they've given to Kate, that it's talk about confusing the citizens and losing, as you laugh there, the transformative effect that Prespa had. Well, we can break that down. We can talk about the transformative effect that Prespa has had. No EU membership, no NATO membership right now, no foreign direct investment really. Expanding regional cooperation. Well, you had the defense minister of Bulgaria there the other day, insisting that Goce Delchev is Bulgarian, and that if Macedonia wants to move forward, that Macedonia has to admit that Goce Delchev was Bulgarian. Yeah. That's regional cooperation. That's a positive future. It's just.
Good neighborly relations should go both ways, and Greece was abusing her membership in NATO and the EU for decades to.
Exactly.
In a way which was definitely not symptomatic of good neighborly relations. But, the US kept telling us, you do this thing and then you're in the club and you get all the perks of being in the club. Now, the ambassador tells us that we are not in the club practically because we would still be bound by this imposed treaty. If we are in the club, if we can exercise the full rights of membership, surely a ludicrous and idiotic and insulting issues such as the name issue which Greece raised against us, which was only justifiable and justified by the internationals with the fact that they're in the club, you're not, you join the club. Maybe, don't reverse it right away. Maybe it's, even Vimber is not saying we're going to reverse it the next morning. They say if we have this enormously high threshold of 81 votes in parliament, which is considered unattainable, or once we join the EU, then we do it. So there is really no reason for the ambassador to do this. It's not like an impending issue. Zaev raised it because Zaev thinks this will help him with internationals.
Of course.
Katie raised it. Maybe she thinks she's helping Zaev. In reality, she's helping Vumero because, Zaev and Katie are portraying Vumero as tougher on the name issue than Vumero have realistically been, and this will help Vumero by extension. Kate, the ambassador, said that she will expect an orderly transition of power after the elections. This is a phrase which may be typical in the U.S., but was seen here as an announcement that there will be a transition of power away from SDSM, which now still largely controls the government, toward Vumero, but that, the U.S. expects the next Vumero government to be, Vumero in SDSM clothing or, acting, or SDSM act in Vumero clothing, not try to reassert Macedonian national sovereignty, even though we get this huge, symbol of sovereignty, which is being a full-fledged NATO member, possibly soon, sitting at the table in Brussels and, in theory, participating in the making of decisions which affect European security and having veto power over other memberships, over decisions of NATO. So, are we a member? Can we exercise our membership rights, or what? Are we just now, bound by the obligations of NATO, like spending on U.S. military equipment, and still a subordinate to Greece? We have to clear this thing out.
Right. Well, yeah. Again, just to clear up the confusion that Kate Byrnes seems to be trying to make in Macedonia. Once Macedonia is in NATO, it cannot be kicked out. There is no mechanism for kicking a member out of NATO. Otherwise, Turkey would have been kicked out some time ago. So Macedonia can, once it's in NATO, has every right to change the name back. How that is done, it's for people with a higher pay grade than me, especially those that know the law in Macedonia, and I am sure that they are working on that even now. But there are little things that, regardless of whether Vumero has 60 members or 80 members or whatever, there's little things that can be done to reassert the Macedonian name throughout the country and to encourage, for instance, businesses to assert the Macedonian name and to say product of Macedonia or Macedonian product or Like, I love the, this is another one. I've got all these future articles I've got half written, Cvetin. Another one is based on the, what was it, the Berlin Fair a few weeks ago, where it said North Macedonian cuisine, quote unquote. And I recall the Prelep Brewery, Zlatan Dab, the beer that they have, the cans say Macedonian beer, Macedonian pivo, on the front of them. So little things that can be done, and of course changing back the names of. Well, let's see. Has Manu has that name been changed yet by the government? I can't remember now.
No, they've been stalling.
Okay, good. Yeah, but there's other organizations. Well, yeah, the Macedonian Information Agency, which is now just what, MIA?
Yeah, they now say they're the Media Information Agency.
Media Information Agency. Conveniently, they both begin with M. Or the Macedonian National Theater, the ballet, opera, those groups, those organizations have had the name changed. They change back. So you start out little by little, and I think it gives people encouragement, and it gives people like Kate Byrnes conniption fits and heartburn. Good. And that's just the way it is, because a sovereign nation, if you're going to be sovereign, you should be able to assert the right of your own name. And we saw that Macedonia really wasn't too sovereign in the past 3 years because it had a puppet installed.
Yeah, and as you just mentioned, Karakachanov, who was in Bitola now, presenting his books, gathering supporters.
This is the, for listeners that don't know, this is the Bulgarian defense minister.
Yeah, and a nationalist from the VMRO BND party, which tries to get the votes of Bulgarians by playing on, will be tough on Macedonia until they acknowledge that they're actually Bulgarians card. And, the treaty with Bulgaria opens the door to further negotiations on historical issues, and obviously opportunistic politicians in Bulgaria are obviously going to use the treaty such as it is such as it's written, to block Macedonia from opening EU accession talks unless we make additional concessions. And, even Zaev's historians, the historians Zaev appointed to this commission to discuss issues with Bulgaria, even they wouldn't sign on to the idea that Goca Delchev, the hero of VMRO, the legendary organizer of the Macedonian national struggle, that he was a Bulgarian. And, this is how these treaties actually give pretext to Greece and Bulgaria. Greece is now quieter on this front because I suppose their prime minister is being blackmailed by the local US Ambassador Kate, because there was a bunch of corruption scandals, the Siemens corruption scandals against Mitsotakis, and he's been strangely quiet on the Prespa treaty, on the Prespa issue, which he was a big critic of before the elections, but now he's mostly ignoring. But in Bulgaria, there's still, the parties think that there's still points to be made in humiliating Macedonia further. They feel that they haven't gotten the full extent of their concessions. Greece maybe feels they've gotten all they wanted, and Zaev did deliver. He did not deliver in full in the case of Bulgaria, and now they're going to keep raising the issue, and they're going to keep chipping away at the Macedonian national identity until this whole thing collapses, which is inevitable unless we reverse course, because as we discussed, there is no point of having a separate Macedonian nation if a Macedonian country if it's populated by Bulgarians and Albanians, and if it's between Bulgaria and Albania, what's the purpose of having a separate country then?
Was the defense minister invited over there, or what was his purpose, by the way?
I think he was invited by a local organization, which was, I suppose, quickly set up by, maybe by the Bulgarian embassy here, they had like 50, 60 people in attendance. Some came to protest, some guys got into his face, so they were escorted out. There was finally the Bitola branch of the Nob fighters. We still have the partisan fighters of World War II, like a veterans association, who, people who claim they fought against Bulgaria although they were probably 3 or 4 at the time, and they protested against Karakachanov coming to Bitola. But I read up on the guy who was protesting. He was a strong supporter of SDSM, of the colored revolution, of SDSM grabbing power from Vimera. And it's an interesting case of careful what you wish for. He got his socialist party back in power, and first thing they do is sign this treaty with Bulgaria. And now I didn't expect that my side will do this, that my side will give up on my struggle against Bulgaria and humiliate me this way. Well, what can I say? Sucks to be you, buddy. But
Exactly.
It was interesting that Karakachanov basically endorsed SDSM, as did Borisov before. Karakachanov was saying that we should be careful not to vote for Vimera because this will jeopardize Macedonia's future in the EU, because he said there are parties here who are against the EU, against the NATO. Be careful how you vote. And like Ambassador Byrnes comments, this might also have the unintended effect of helping Vimera, which has not been particularly outspoken against the treaty with Bulgaria either, except when the Bulgarians pushed too hard, like when Borisov secretly broadcasted his meeting with Mitskovsky, or like in this case, after Karakachanov's statement, Vimera had a very stern press release that they will not allow the further haggling and trading away Gotsa Delchov's identity as a Macedonian national hero. So both sides, all of this is having the predictable counter effect.
Right. And let's talk a little bit about the European Union and Macedonia's membership in it, because, as you said, that he basically, another threat towards Macedonia, that if Macedonia doesn't recognize that they're really Bulgarians and that Gotse Delcev was a Bulgarian, then Bulgaria is going to thwart Macedonia's EU membership. And so on a couple of things on that. So this week, first week of February, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the new methodology that France has been championing comes out, or is revealed, or the first draft that comes out. So we'll have an idea on that. I think the Italian ambassador to Macedonia came out the other day and basically said that Macedonia and Albania should not be decoupled, meaning...
Yeah, Italy is strongly supportive of Albania in this case.
Right. So, a couple other European countries. I think Greece actually also says that the two, Macedonia and Albania, should not be decoupled.
Yes, but Italy is adamant. Italy is 100% behind Albania.
All right, good. That means that Macedonia will never join the EU because Albania can't. At least as long as...
Greece supports Albania, incidentally, because they block us by proxy.
Exactly.
If they lump it, that's the trick.
So we've got that. We've got the new methodology coming out, and then of course, contrary to what the doomsdayers and naysayers all said, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland did not sink into the North Atlantic on Saturday, the first day that their freedom had been restored.
Into Azure, Maine.
Our hope is restored. Think of the Geoffrey Rush as Captain Barbossa in the first Pirates. So yes. So Brexit happened finally, almost 4 years after they voted, despite people like George Soros and Tony Blair and others that attempted to thwart the will of the people. This is the first time that the vote of the people has been respected in the European Union, and it sure took a hell of a lot to get it through. But the EU is severely damaged. And I think even that the most ardent EU cheerleaders understand that as well. I think Macron came out the other day and said, we've really got to do some self-examination here and see what we did wrong that allowed this to happen. So this is the backdrop in which Macedonia and Macedonians need to think about the EU. To Kate's point, what did she say here? She said the citizens really need to think about this. So yes, so I agree with her on that. citizens really do need to think about this. And is it necessary to join a union that has so many problems and its future is in question? And the reason is because I still firmly believe, and I know you do too, and there's plenty of Macedonians that know this because it happens to be true, that there are alternatives. And Macedonia has proven that in the past, that economic growth can be had without being a member of the European Union. And and again, even if I think it was the European Stability Initiative, yes, Gerard or Knoss or whatever his name is, they came out the other week and said 10 years, at least 10 years, a decade, before Macedonia could join the European Union. And that assumes that they were able to get their own house in order now and figure out what the new methodology is. So Macedonians need to take control of their own destiny.
Yeah, there was the only response to Brexit, other than that pretty funny video statement from the ambassador, Rachel Galloway, which was, I believe, the first time she mentioned Brexit. I don't think the embassy has ever, like the US embassy never tweets about Trump, the British embassy never tweets about Brexit. Right. But the only response we had here domestically on Brexit came from Nikola Dimitrov and his deputy Andrei Zhirinovsky, who both had the same position that, well, listen, it's no big deal, it's not the end of the world, as you said. The Brits are leaving the EU, but they're not leaving Europe. As you said, they still haven't sunk into the ocean, which then, completely contrasts what both of these guys and everybody else in SDSM has been telling us for years, that it will be end of the world for us if we do not join the EU, and we have to give up our national identity and sovereignty and let these ambassadors run our country, picking easily the worst of the crop we have here on offer of politicians, and there is no other alternative for us, etc. But now they say, well, it's no big deal. They're still, geographically and in all other terms part of Europe, so why can't this apply to us? Why couldn't the EU just decide that the Greek interest in just is crazy? They should just give us the structural funds for the highways and whatever we need, and then, leave us out of the political association, which they will be so sorry when it eventually happens anyway. They're going to regret it so badly. I mean, words cannot express the damage we'll do to them once we are a full member of the EU, and we will do this gleefully. Yes. And why would they want us as a member of a political union? Just give us the money, which would then, serve the purpose of not pushing us to ask for Chinese infrastructural funds or Russian gas. It's pittance for them. It would, if it's such a big deal, reduce the room for foreign meddling in Macedonia, although what they're doing is, nothing, it's obviously foreign meddling. But okay, this is the EU and the US foreign meddling is apparently okay, fine. Just own up to your obligations, provide the infrastructure funding, and then get out of our hair, because, from everything we've seen, from their choice of politicians they support, from their choice of journalists they support, from their choice of prosecutors and judges they support, they just avoid going into the public and before critical press. Otherwise, the ambassadors here. Otherwise, obviously, Kate was giving a statement to a journalist who receives USAID funding right now. The British ambassador was speaking, before her own staffers, who held the camera. The Italian ambassador spoke to the US-funded Radio Free Europe. They would not go to a critical journalist who would ask them, well, listen, you supported Katitsianova, you supported Vilma Ruskovska, Zoran Zaev, what gives?
Yeah.
And, everything they touched was a reverse Midas touch. And, it's amusing, but...
Sleeping from your body. say the N-word. What are the rules? What are the rules?
And you mentioned Balkan Insight before. You know what those idiots did? They had a report on the Macedonian judiciary and what's the big problem in the judiciary. And they say it's these jury judges, like these civil judges which participate in a trial.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them had to retire. We explained this in detail over the Cvetin trial, where he wants to get like 40 million euros from the government, and the judges were insisting to give them the money to him, but one of the judges had to retire, and the whole thing collapsed, or is at least postponed. And and now Balkan Insight, they have a report how this is a huge scandal. Not that a person like Tsanovsky was asking to get 40 million from the government, but that he did not get them. And they say, well, let's quote an expert in the judiciary, and they quote Sofia Lalicic. And this was a lady who was prominent in the original wiretaps. She's like a young judge who in the wiretaps is talking to Sasha Mielkov. And she says, this judge, she was promoted because she gave Swarovski crystals, like a necklace, to this older judge. And so out of the wiretaps, Sofia Lalicic was, by the left, she was declared to be, the mistress of Sasha Mielkov, the epitome of everything that's wrong in the judiciary. This is the type of judges Vemura promotes, the Swarovski judiciary. They used all sorts of ugliest possible imaginable slurs against her. And now Balkan Insight quotes her as a reputable, as a decent, as a proper judge who will give you her opinion on why Fiat Tsanovsky should have gotten his 40 million.
Wow.
It was like me in like a few years quoting Fatime Fetai or Lindsay Ristovska favorably, because she says something that at the moment will correspond with my positions or helps me out in a daily political fight. So can you imagine how crazy the person who was by the left declared to be the symbol of the Swarovski judiciary, of a corrupt Vemura judiciary, she's now a Balkan Insight source of good repute.
Well, of course, it's like Nikola Dimitrov and Andrei Zhirinovsky, as you said, saying, we're not European unless we're in the EU, and then saying that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is still European, even though it's not in the EU. So, anyway.
I don't know. We can't be sure.
No standards, no
At this point, it does feel like
consistency, no nothing.
Yeah, exactly. These are the people we're dealing with.
What are the rules?
Of sleeping from your body.
What are the rules? Who could say the N-word? What are the rules? I really want to say the N-word. What are the rules? What are the rules?
Moneyland is the Oscar-nominated documentary feature from the obscure Balkan country of Nordonistan. The movie portrays the hardscrabble life of farmer Zoran Zaev, who makes it big when he needed to swap his crops of cucumbers and tomatoes for an exotic new plant introduced to Nordonistan from the neighboring duchy of Alba. Zoran and his brother Gitze cultivate the new plant, ganja, for its many medicinal purposes, but also discover a side effect. Those using it lose mental capacity to the point they're ready to vote for Zaev, who seizes the opportunity and sets up a political party that quickly storms to power with the help of mysterious foreign supporters interested in seeing Nordonistan become a major ganja exporter, as well as a useful station on the continental slave trade. Hollywood will certainly applaud the sustainable farming practices engraved by Zaev as he splits the proceeds among his brother, cousins, ambassadors, his bishop, and there's also some left over for his colorful group of supporters from the bleak capital city who try to escape from the drudgery of their daily existence in the relief offered by Zaev's plans. Critics will rave about the language, with Hollywood Reporter calling it a house of cards set in the Balkan backwater, and the Daily Mail asks, how long will it be before the Nordoni ganja makes its way to California?
Hey, did he make a sequel to Honeyland?
Not quite.
Oh well, this would be a more documentary take on contemporary Macedonia than Honeyland.
Absolutely, no, it'd be a very good one, I think, accurately explaining Zoran Zaev and his crop of ganja and what he's done with it, what he's going to do with it, what he intends to do with it. So yes, it's a humorous take on that. But again, this is the one thing we failed to mention at the top. We went through a bunch of dates, Brexit and the what do you call it, the Super Bowl today and whatnot. But next week, a week from today, is the Oscars, and Honeyland, which has won
Not Moneyland.
not Moneyland, Honeyland, which won numerous awards at Sundance, has been nominated for the Oscars in 2 categories, and that is Best International Film. They used to call it foreign films, but Best International Film and Best Documentary. Of course, we wish them well in that. This is really putting a not just a spotlight, but a lot of spotlights on Macedonia. Shout out to the cinematographers for Honeyland. I'm going to pronounce their names wrong, probably. Femi Daut and Samir Luta, who
Very good.
were at the American Society of Cinematographers last week. The inaugural award that the ASC had in documentaries, and Todd Phillips, who was the director of Joker, gave the award. He had the envelope, he pulled it out, and it said Honeyland. So both men came up stage quite nervous, of course, but a shout out to them because both in that and then in an interview after that, they both said, we are from Macedonia. And so shout out to them for acknowledging the truth. And so I hope that Macedonia gets a lot of exposure for this, that when people talk about Honeyland, they talk about Macedonia and the story from Macedonia. Cvetin, I think you finally saw the film, right?
Yes, I broke my embargo on not watching Macedonian movies. Did you see it?
I saw it last year, actually.
Yeah, you saw it way back. Yeah. I
Yeah, it was many months ago. What did you think?
I mean, obviously the cinematography is beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, the scenery, it's desolate, it's empty, but there is a visual beauty. I'm not sure about the message they're trying to get across. I have issues with it because obviously it's been portrayed. I think it was it Sarah Jessica Parker
Right.
or
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis. One of them. She discussed how it criticizes the greed of people, and there is like this old Turkish lady which tends to her sick mother and sustainably, if you can use the word, harvests the wild honey. But then comes another family with a beauty of children, and obviously the father needs to provide for the children, so he has more boxes of bees, not just those wildly going around which Atija goes after. And now the new bees, the new swarms are intruding on Atija's turf, and her bees die out. So I think this was what these Hollywood girls were saying, that it's greed and avarice. But I mean, I don't know. I drove around this region last year. I think it's so empty. It's perfect cattle, sheep raising, goat raising territory, and I guess bees as well. But it's completely depopulated. It's completely empty. The Ovcha Pola plateau there. If somebody moves next door and starts, intruding on your turf, there's so many territory around there you can expand. There's really, I thought, this confrontation between the two groups was so ridiculous. It's not like people are fighting over land there. There's so much you can. It's being also portrayed as this environmentalist movie, how we should care about the nature. But what actually in reality what happened was, as soon as the movie became prominent, they asked Atija, okay, what can we do for you, the movie guys and girls? And she immediately said, get me the F out of here. And they're preparing a house for her in the village next door, which is like 500 people, has some comforts of normal life in the 21st century. And, these are the Yuruk Turks. These are, when the Turks fled, only some pockets in the most remote hillsides of Turks remained, and nobody should live like this in the 21st century. Nobody should be deprived of running water or asphalt. I mean, it's very amusing watching our politicians these days try to get to the village. So some group of politicians actually took the wrong detour, so they walked for a long time, although there was a dirt road accessible which by jeep, so they walked like 4 hours trying to to do the photo op before the elections with
that's
Tatija before she moved to the other village. I mean, it's not, if anything, it tells us we should use more fossil fuels to provide electricity to these parts of Macedonia which still live like in the 12th century, that we should pave the roads finally to these villages and bring running water and it's not. I mean, it even annoys me. There was a lot of leftists here from the Colored Revolution, people who were coming up with. One guy was coming up with one stupid idea, and then the other guys just like out-stupid him, like how we should help her, but it's all in the purpose of keeping her in this.
Keeping her in the village.
Desolate.
Oh my! Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just let's not like similar to what stupid Americans talk about. Well, how can we keep Cuba not commercialized once it opens up?
Right.
Like, guys, she can't wait to get out of there. The Cubans can't wait to get out of there. They're swimming in shark-infested waters in Buicks with tires around them, hoping not to sink. The left wants to maintain this idyllic pastoral life, which means loneliness, cold in winters, freezing yourself, sweltering heat in summer.
Yeah, it's the noble savage view. So, and we could go deep into the weeds on that, and then expand into conservative philosophy and even the conservative view of the environment. Of course, I maintain that conservatives are best at conserving the environment because, for a whole variety of reasons we won't get into now. But anyway, I'm not a film critic. I had parts of the film I enjoyed, as you mentioned, the cinematography and whatnot. The story of take half, leave half, certainly. But I'm looking at this through the eyes of a PR guy. So how do we promote Macedonia, and how do we put a spotlight on Macedonia with this? And so we will see next week, a week from today, when the Academy Awards are held, if Honeyland wins in one or both. That would be an amazing feat.
Yeah, the guys so far have been all right. I mean, I was worried when I saw the ambassadors, the usual suspects here, touting the movie. I feared that it will go along the path of Tamara Todevska's Eurovision contest, where she would use the N-word all the time. These guys so far, they're great, and obviously Daut and Luma, they're not even Macedonians, but they did us the courtesy of using our proper name, and great for them.
Oh, they're Macedonian citizens, they're not ethnic
So far,
Macedonians.
so good. They're Albanians, I think, both of them. But there's a bunch of Macedonians here who do this properly. This green food life. So tax-heavy people with some resources who could do whatever they wanted in life, and they realize there is money in promoting sustainable, organic products from Macedonia, which you've been here, you've loved our cuisine, there's lots of it, and great, done professionally, done economically, done by people who know how to do this. It could be a great promotion of Macedonia if we would have organic honey harvested in this way, but not because it's out of necessity, not because this poor woman has been deprived any other venue in life or any other opportunity because of centralized development, which deprived the hinterland, the provinces, of any resources, and communism, and keeping the banks deliberately state managed for so long, and all these obstacles to development, which we've been busy dismantling over the 10 years under Nikola Gruevski, basically, we need to keep dismantling them. But then obviously there will be a market for such products. It can be done by people who want to do this and know how to do this, but not because they're kept like serfs without any other opportunity.
Right.
This is what I strongly disliked in the way the movie is being portrayed. The movie itself is not like a celebration of this life. I don't think anybody, at least anybody who lives here, would see it as a celebration of her life, other than, the know-nothings in Hollywood. I don't think the filmmakers want to portray it as the glory of a life without any conveniences of modern-day life. But it could be used, as you said. Definitely, it could be a good promotion of Macedonia in the coming years.
Yeah, and we'll see next week at the Academy Awards. So, and with that, I think that is a full podcast.
More than one.
All right. Always great talking to you.
You too, buddy. Take care.
It's the only thing we haven't tried.
Yeah, right?
What are the rules of being black in America? What are the rules?
Of leaping from your body.
What are the rules? Who can say the N-word? What are the rules? I really want to say the